Thank you for participating in your required annual training as an employee at UNC Chapel Hill. The University Compliance Office has developed one annual training for employees to cover UCO policies, university expectations, and responsible employee obligations. The goal is for employees to understand both how they can seek support if they experience harassment, discrimination, sexual misconduct, or workplace violence, and how they can support others who experience such behavior through their reporting obligations as responsible employees. As of June 2nd, 2025, the Equal Opportunity and Compliance Office has undergone a name change and is now the University Compliance Office. While our name is changing, our core functions and our commitment to leading the university's efforts to comply with state and federal non-discrimination laws remain the same. The UCO's accommodations team will continue to provide accommodations based on disability, pregnancy, and religion, partner with offices across campus to ensure physical, digital, and programmatic accessibility, and operate our testing center. The Report and Response and Investigations team will continue to receive, respond to, and investigate reports of misconduct under the Policy on Prohibited Discrimination, Harassment, and Related Misconduct, the Policy on Prohibited Sexual Harassment under Title IX, and the Workplace Violence Policy. The UCO will also continue to support the university's efforts related to equal employment opportunity through search committee training, skills assessment, and management of the waiver of the recruitment process. This transition process will take some time to update all references to our former name, so we appreciate your patience. For updates and current contact information, you can visit go.unc.edu/UCO. In today's training, we will discuss the behaviors prohibited by UCO policy. We'll talk more about responsible employee reporting and how to report to the UCO, and learn more about reasonable accommodations. All employees play a part in keeping our campus safe and free from discrimination and harassment. Confidential employees, those who have been designated by law and or policy as not being required to make responsible employee reports, have an obligation to inform parties on how to make a report to the UCO if they've disclosed experiencing harassment, discrimination, or workplace violence. Everyone else on campus has been designated as a responsible employee. This means that you must report all known information about protected status, harassment, discrimination, and workplace violence to the UCO office. All faculty and staff who do not have a confidential designation under UCO policy are considered responsible employees. As a responsible employee, you must report information you receive, whether it involves students or employees. You should also report regardless of how you learn the information. For example, whether you learn it directly from the impacted person or not. Confidential resources who are acting within the scope of their confidential duties do not have to disclose information shared with them, including to the university, except under limited circumstances, including continuing threats of serious violence to the patient, client, or to others, or a legal obligation to reveal such information, such as suspected abuse or neglect of a minor. Confidential resources who are acting within the scope of their confidential duties still have an obligation to assist the university, ensuring that all students and employees who may have experienced prohibited conduct are given accurate information about reporting and support options. Now let's talk about how you make a responsible employee report and share the information with UCO. The university is firmly committed to maintaining a campus environment that is free from discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, interpersonal violence, workplace violence, retaliation, and other forms of misconduct. UCO has multiple policies that prohibit certain conduct by students, employees, and others on our campus to help aid in the university's commitment. If a responsible employee has information about behavior prohibited by these policies, you are required to share that information with the UCO as soon as possible. These policies define what situations you need to share with the UCO. As a responsible employee, you should report all known information, including the names of the impacted person and others involved. the date and time of the incident, and the location of the incident. While you should not investigate, you should ask for the name of the individuals involved so that we can take steps to ensure the safety of the impacted individuals. You can make a report to the UCO's online reporting form by email to any member of the UCO's staff, in person at the UCO office, or by telephone. While any member of the UCO office can take your report, we encourage you to reach out to the Associate Vice Chancellor and Title IX Coordinator, the Director of Report and Response, or one of our Report and Response managers. Here's where to access the UCO's online reporting form. You'll find it by going to go.unc.edu/UCO and clicking on Make a Report in the upper right-hand corner. Next, we'll cover the UCO's policies. If a responsible employee has information about behavior prohibited by these policies, you're required to share that information with the UCO as soon as possible. These policies define what situations you need to share with the UCO. The broad policy on prohibited discrimination, harassment, and related misconduct prohibits any form of discrimination or harassment based on a protected status, which includes sexual misconduct. Responsible employees are also required to share misconduct defined by the policy on prohibited sexual harassment under Title IX, which prohibits sexual harassment as defined in federal regulations. The UCO office is responsible for the workplace violence policy, which applies to conduct of employees, third parties, and contractors on campus. The UCO is also responsible for some components of the nepotism and interpersonal relationships policy. The conduct and expectations set out in these policies applies to on-campus conduct, conduct on university-owned or controlled property, conduct that occurs in the context of a university program, and off-campus conduct outside of a university program if the conduct has or is reasonably likely to have continuing adverse effects on university employment or an educational program or activity. I've mentioned the terms discrimination and harassment a few times now, so I want to further define what that means. Discrimination means any unlawful distinction, preference, or detriment to an individual as compared to others that is based on their protected status and that is sufficiently serious to unreasonably interfere with or limit their ability to access or participate in their employment or education. An example could be failing to provide or implement reasonable accommodations that have been approved by the UCO office. Harassment is a type of discrimination that occurs when unwelcome verbal, physical, electronic, or other conduct based on a protected status is severe or pervasive enough to interfere with a person's educational or work environment. Harassment generally takes two forms: hostile environment harassment or quid pro quo. You don't have to memorize the distinctions between these two or all of the language of UCO policies. The most important takeaway is to know that if you or someone you know on campus are experiencing a working or learning environment that is impacted by the behaviors described here, there are resources at UNC to support you. Protected status refers to the identities listed on the screen: age, disability, gender, gender expression, gender identity, genetic information, race, color, national origin, religion, sex, sexual orientation, and veteran status. Discrimination based on any of these 13 protected statuses is prohibited. If a responsible employee learns that someone is being treated differently than others based on a protected status, this is information that needs to be shared with the UCO. Sexual harassment, sexual assault and sexual violence, and sexual exploitation are also prohibited under this policy because they are severe forms of sex discrimination. Other forms of related misconduct are prohibited, including relationship violence, stalking, and retaliation. And if you learn of these behaviors, you must share that with the UCO. The prohibition on sex discrimination can include discrimination based on current, potential, or past pregnancy or related conditions, as well as sex-based differential treatment related to someone's parental, family, or marital status. Let's take a moment to review some examples based on what we've discussed so far. Example 1. You're serving on a search committee for an open position in your department. There are several highly qualified female candidates that your colleagues have written off as potential finalists for the position, saying that they'll just get pregnant and be out on maternity leave soon anyway. One of the search committee members has asked to include a question about family planning in the interview questions to weed out anyone who isn't committed. This is an example of discrimination related to pregnancy status that should be reported to the UCO office. Example 2. Jason is an employee with a chronic pain condition. He uses an anti-fatigue mat at his workstation as one of his reasonable accommodations. Jason's coworkers complain that he gets preferential treatment and have even hidden Jason's mat from him as a joke. Jason's coworkers are insistent that everyone has back pain from standing by the end of the day, and he shouldn't get any perks. Jason can report his concerns to the UCO. We will assess options for support and response, which could include directly addressing the conduct and or providing targeted training for the department. So let's continue to learn about more prohibited conduct. Looking back at the policy, sexual assault and sexual violence are forms of sexual harassment that include having or attempting to have sexual contact without consent. The policies also prohibit interpersonal or relationship violence, which is defined as actions taken against an intimate partner, family member, or cohabitant that cause intimidation or fear or are threatening. Stalking is also prohibited by these policies, which is defined by repeated unwanted actions that cause fear or create a hostile, intimidating, or abusive environment. Consent is part of how we show respect to each other in both interpersonal and sexual relationships. This slide provides more information on how UCO's policy defines consent to sexual activity, which is an affirmative, conscious, and freely made decision to engage in sexual contact. We define sexual exploitation as another form of sexual harassment. UNC's policy prohibits several specific forms of sexual exploitation. These include threatening to out someone as gay or transgender, sending unsolicited nude pictures to others, streaming or distributing pictures, video, or audio of nudity or sexual contact without consent of all parties involved, prostituting another individual, exposing someone to an STI without disclosing to them that you have it, failing to use agreed upon contraception, or inducing incapacitation to engage in sexual behavior with someone. Let's look at another example. Staff member Rita reports that her team members often overshare information about their dating lives in the workplace, showing her sexually explicit photos and messages from their recent hookups without her consent. Rita has tried to talk to her manager about the problem, but was told that it's a form of team bonding and not to be so sensitive. This behavior could be categorized as sexual harassment or sexual exploitation. When the manager is involved in the behavior or allowing it to happen, that can create a power dynamic that makes it difficult to report. Report and response managers are available to talk to impacted parties about barriers to reporting or participating in a formal determination process and concerns that you might have about retaliation. UCO policy acknowledges that discrimination and harassment can occur based on one or more interconnected protected statuses. One example of this type of discrimination is anti-Semitic discrimination, which can be harassment or discrimination based on a person's religion and or national origin. Some examples of anti-Semitic discrimination or harassment may include defacing an individual's property with a hateful symbol or word such as a swastika, or refusing to allow an individual to participate in a university-sponsored program or event due to their Jewish identity. Another example of this type of discrimination or harassment is Islamophobic discrimination, which may be based on national origin and/or religion. Some examples of Islamophobic discrimination or harassment include blaming an individual for the actions of others of their actual or perceived shared identity. The UCO office is also responsible for the workplace violence policy. Workplace violence includes behaviors such as bullying, cyberbullying, intimidation, physical attacks, threats, use of an unauthorized weapon, or hazing by an employee. Hazing is defined by university policy as engaging in conduct that cause or permit an individual, with or without consent, to be subject to a risk of physical injury, mental distress, humiliation, abuse, and/or other personal indignities of a highly offensive nature in connection with recruitment, initiation, continued membership, or participation in a student organization, group, club, or athletic team. Employees must also not knowingly aid, facilitate, or promote the commission of hazing. Examples of hazing by an employee could include a faculty advisor of a registered student organization requiring that all incoming members participate in a degrading or humiliating activity, an athletic coach allowing their team captain to haze members of the athletic team, or a staff member facilitating hazing by knowingly providing students with access to space on campus or the materials to engage in hazing. Workplace violence is defined as behavior that would cause a reasonable person to have concern for personal safety or risk of physical injury, or to experience substantial emotional distress, and applies to situations beyond unprofessional behavior, annoyance, irritation, or petty disagreements. This policy applies to employees, contractors, and visitors. Students who engage in this conduct should be referred to student conduct. Let's review an example of potential workplace violence. Oscar's coworker Larry persistently makes comments about his size and weight, calling him fatty and other rude names. During a faculty breakfast, Larry suggested that Oscar didn't need a bagel and said that Oscar might want to lay off the carbs. Larry's heard from colleagues that Oscar has called him lazy and unmotivated, even though Oscar receives excellent reviews from students and has the highest research output in the department. This behavior is an example of bullying in the workplace and is conduct that goes beyond petty disagreement. Next, we'll review some additional conduct that is prohibited by UCO policies. Under the university's nepotism and interpersonal relationships policy, disclosures and reports of employees engaging in romantic relationships with students in violation of the policy should be made to the University Compliance Office. University employees may not engage in a romantic relationship with any student other than a spouse who is a minor under the age of 18. Additionally, university employees may not evaluate or supervise, either directly or indirectly, any student with whom they have or had a romantic relationship or who is a related person. Complicity is defined as any act that assists another person with behavior that violates UCO's policy. Retaliation is prohibited by UCO policy. Retaliation is any adverse action or attempted action that would discourage a reasonable person from engaging in protected activity. Protected activity includes things like a person's actual or perceived participation in a UCO reporting and/or resolution process, or participation in the accommodations process. And adverse actions may include things like intimidation, threats, adverse employment or educational actions, or other malicious and purposeful interference related to the resolution of a report. And here's our final example. You are a faculty member in the college. Jen, a second year graduate student, tells you that he's having a really hard time with his advisor, Alexis. Jen says he's the only male graduate student working with Alexis, and Alexis is much more critical of his work than she is of the female graduate students. He also says that when he and the other graduate students meet with Alexis, Alexis talks over him, interrupts him, and criticizes him in front of the group. Alexis doesn't engage in this behavior toward the female students. Jen doesn't want you to tell anyone because he's afraid Alexis will speak negatively about him in recommendation letters. Concerns of retaliation can be a barrier to reporting for students and employees and are a consideration for many when choosing whether to seek assistance. We know that individuals can be reluctant to report because of fear of retaliation. The UCO can work with individuals to understand what specific forms of retaliation they are concerned about and put measures in place to protect individuals from retaliation. For example, if a student is concerned that a faculty member will retaliate by grading them unfairly, UCO can work with the school or department to implement blind grading or to identify a neutral third party to review graded assignments. Likewise, if an employee is concerned that their supervisor will retaliate against them by giving them a poor performance review, UCO can work with the department and human resources to implement a neutral review of the employee's performance. Individuals may also be concerned with other types of retaliation, such as being offered fewer opportunities in the workplace, being given a poor letter of recommendation, or having negative rumors started in the individual's academic or professional community. The UCO can work to prevent these forms of discrimination by implementing measures such as neutral third party reviews of assignments to committees or other opportunities, neutral third party reviews of recommendation letters, identifying an appropriate, uninvolved individual in a school or department to provide letters of recommendation, or giving specific directives to responding parties or other individuals about behaviors that could be retaliatory. These are just some examples of preventative measures. As a responsible employee, you can encourage individuals to discuss their specific retaliation concerns with the UCO so that UCO can work to tailor supportive measures for their individual situation. We recognize people look to you as a trusted resource, which is why they're disclosing this information in the first place. We know that you, as responsible employees, care a lot about people who might share misconduct with you, and that you want to make sure that you respond appropriately and compassionately. We also want you to feel comfortable with this role and to make sure you understand what happens after you make a report to the UCO. We'll spend some time talking about this in the next section. Again, as a responsible employee, you should report all known information, including the names of the impacted person and others involved, the date and time of the incident, and the location of the incident. While you should not investigate, you should ask for the name of the individuals involved so that we can take steps to ensure the safety of the impacted individuals. You can make a report on the UCO's online reporting form, by email to any member of the UCO staff, in person at the UCO's office, or by telephone. While any member of the UCO office can take your report, we encourage you to reach out to the Associate Vice Chancellor and Title IX Coordinator, the Director of Report and Response, or one of our Report and Response managers. Here's where to access the UCO's online reporting form. You'll find it by going to go.unc.edu/UCO and clicking on Make an Incident Report in the upper right-hand corner. Responsible employees play a very important role in our campus. You're likely the first person who learns about an individual's experience of prohibited conduct, and your response could impact whether or not they seek further support. It is critical that you respond with care. First and foremost, listen supportively by giving them your full attention. Express your concern for their well-being and share that you and the university take the situation very seriously. Thank them for sharing this information with you. In addition to listening supportively, you may provide them with resources. This may include asking them if they need help addressing immediate health or safety needs, which you can do by connecting them with UNC Police, Campus Health, or CAPS. You can also let them know that the university has confidential resources that they can talk to. Always follow their lead in the conversation. If they want to focus on the emotional impact of the event rather than the facts, let them do so. You don't have to have a fact-finding agenda in the conversation. Your role is to support, listen, and share what you learn with the UCO. Sometimes people will want to speak to a confidential resource rather than someone who has a responsible employee reporting obligation. It can be helpful for you to share with them early on in the conversation that you have a reporting obligation, and before they go further by sharing information that you'll have to provide to the UCO, you can connect them with someone confidential. We've provided some sample language here, but we encourage you to practice your own version so that you feel comfortable with when you encounter the situation. We also encourage you to let folks know you're a responsible employee early in your work relationship with them so that they are informed about your reporting obligations. This could be in a staff meeting or during office hours. As a responsible employee, you must make a report to the UCO, not simply encourage the impacted person to report. As a responsible employee, you should not discourage the impacted person from reporting to the UCO office, investigate the incident on your own, or screen out reports or attempt to assess whether the report is true or serious enough to report. If the report touches on any of the behaviors discussed here, you should make a responsible employee report. When UCO receives a report, the safety of the individuals involved and the campus community is of paramount importance. UCO staff and the response team will assess the nature of the reported conduct and the potential risk to the campus community. Making a responsible employee report does not automatically trigger a formal disciplinary investigation or notice to the individual who reportedly engaged in misconduct. Instead, UCO's initial steps include a safety assessment and reaching out to the impacted person to understand their perspective, needs, and desired resolution. UCO staff will send an email to the impacted person to offer resources and reporting options, including law enforcement, explain immediate medical care options, explain available protective measures, and invite the impacted person to connect with them. When the impacted individual receives the email from UCO, it's up to them whether they respond. Whether or not they decide to respond, they can use any of the resources shared in the email. Responding in this way allows the university to make sure that all impacted individuals have access to all the information they need, and also allow the impacted individual to feel empowered in how they'd like to move forward. It also allows UNC as an institution to provide a consistent response to individuals across campus, regardless of which area on campus or department they're from. Here's some information about the resources shared in those outreach emails. UCO can assist with a number of supportive measures, including mutual no contact orders, changes to housing, class schedules or work assignments, and help managing classes, workloads, and deadlines. We can connect individuals with confidential medical and emotional support resources, as well as formal reporting options. UCO report and response managers are well trained to work with folks on an individual basis regarding their needs and what action, if any, they're needing from the university. The UCO works to ensure compliance with the ADA and other applicable federal laws and oversees the reasonable accommodations process. UCO is responsible for the accommodations policy and associated procedures to address the provision of disability accommodations to employees, students, applicants, program participants, and visitors to campus, religious accommodations to employees, students, and applicants, and pregnancy and related medical condition accommodations to employees, students, applicants, and program participants. This slide provides a summary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, a federal law that prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability across key areas of public life, including employment, state and local government services, public accommodations, transportation, and communication. The ADA defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities or major bodily functions, and also protects individuals with a history of such an impairment or who are perceived as having one. The definition of disability is purposefully broad, with the goal to apply to all individuals who need reasonable accommodations to work and learn in our community. Under the ADA and related laws, the university has a legal obligation to provide equal access and prohibit discriminatory practices against qualified individuals with disabilities. The ADA prohibits discrimination on the basis of disability in a broad range of areas. Specifically, the ADA applies to employment, ensuring equal opportunities in the hiring process, workplace accommodations, and job retention; public services, including access to state and local government programs and services; public accommodations and facilities, such as schools, libraries, restaurants, and other public spaces; telecommunications, which guarantees accessible communication systems like captioned phones and relay services. At our university, the ADA coordinator plays a central role in promoting campus wide accessibility. This work includes collaboration with many departments, including the Digital Accessibility Office, which supports the accessibility of websites and other digital content, the Transportation and Parking Accessibility Committee, which addresses accommodations related to campus parking and transit, and Facility Services, which works to ensure our buildings and physical spaces are accessible to all members of the community. These collaborations help ensure our campus remains inclusive and ADA compliant. Below are examples of environmental and logistical accommodations that help ensure access for individuals with disabilities. Under facilities accessibility, accommodations may include adding ramps or automatic doors, adjusting lighting to reduce sensory impact, relocating to accessible spaces, or holding events in accessible venues. We also support modified work schedules, such as alternative start times, flexible hours, or more frequent breaks. Lastly, we may modify work locations by offering remote work, relocating someone to a quieter or more private area, or ensuring their workspace is close to accessible entrances, exits, or restrooms. This slide outlines common accommodations related to equipment and digital accessibility. Under acquiring or modifying equipment, accommodations may include tools like screen readers or dictation software, noise machines or noise canceling headphones, ergonomic furniture, and adaptive keyboards or mice to support a range of physical or sensory needs. We may also provide visual alert systems, such as flashing alarms for individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing. In terms of digital accessibility, we work to ensure that websites and digital content are accessible to all users. This includes providing materials in alternative formats like large print, braille, or audio captioning video content, and offering real-time communication access, such as CART services or ASL interpreters for meetings or events. This slide highlights two important categories of accommodations we often provide: leave and time off, and modifications to policies or practices. Under leave-related accommodations, we may provide additional time off beyond FMLA and intermittent leave for ongoing treatment or condition flare-ups, and gradual return to work schedules for individuals transitioning back after an extended leave. We also support individuals by modifying existing policies or practices when needed. This may include adjusting communication or instruction methods, allowing the use of service or emotional support animals where appropriate, and modifying dress codes or uniform requirements to accommodate disability-related needs. All accommodations are considered on a case-by-case basis. The university provides reasonable accommodations for religious beliefs, practices, and observances in accordance with federal and state law. A religious accommodation is an adjustment to the work environment or schedule that allows employees, students, and applicants to practice their sincerely held religious beliefs, absent undue hardship or fundamental alteration. This slide presents examples of common religious accommodations. These are adjustments that support individuals in observing sincerely held religious beliefs. They may include absences or rescheduled deadlines, flexible scheduling, or allowing makeup time for religious observances. Other accommodations can include exceptions to dress or grooming codes, access to private spaces for prayer, and dietary accommodations in campus or workplace settings. The UCO assists employees and students with accommodations requests for a broad range of conditions related to pregnancy, including pregnancy, past pregnancy, infertility, childbirth, end of a pregnancy, medical conditions related to pregnancy, childbirth, or other end to a pregnancy, or lactation or recovery from any of those conditions. If a student or employee notifies you that they are pregnant, you're encouraged to inform them of how they can contact the UCO to seek accommodations for pregnancy-related conditions. This slide outlines examples of common workplace accommodations that may be provided to employees who are pregnant, postpartum, or managing related medical needs. Firstly, we may modify work schedules or shift assignments to accommodate fatigue, medical appointments, or other health related limitations. In some cases, we may also adjust or temporarily suspend strenuous or hazardous job duties to avoid risk to the employee's health. Employees may need additional breaks for hydration, restroom use, or rest, especially during later stages of pregnancy or postpartum recovery. We may also provide access to ergonomic seating or other physical supports to reduce discomfort. In certain situations, temporary telework arrangements or remote assignments may be appropriate. For employees who are breastfeeding, we ensure access to a private, non-bathroom space for lactation or expressing milk in accordance with federal and state requirements. We also consider accommodations such as permitting food or drink in the workspace when medically necessary and allowing employees to sit while teaching or supervising, especially in roles that typically require extended periods of standing. All these accommodations are tailored to the individual's needs and are evaluated through an interactive process to determine what is reasonable and effective given the role and setting. This slide outlines the basic steps for requesting an accommodation, whether you're a student or an employee. Step 1 is to notify your institution or employer of your need for an accommodation. This is typically done by completing an accommodation request form. Step 2 may involve submitting additional documentation if requested. This helps the accommodation team better understand the nature of the individual's needs and accommodations that may assist. Step 3 is participation in what's called the interactive process. This is a collaborative dialogue to explore what reasonable accommodations might be appropriate. It usually includes a meeting with an accommodation specialist to review your request and talk through options. Step 4 is receiving a written determination of any accommodations that have been approved. It's important to note that requests can be made at any time. The process is individualized and confidential, and the goal is to ensure equal access while considering both the individual's needs and the essential functions of their role or program. This slide displays a screenshot of our website. To complete an accommodation request form, please select the Request Accommodations link. This is the next page that will be displayed. You'll select the type of accommodation that you're requesting. The accommodation request form will be available under Step 1. This slide highlights the Access Concern form, which members of the campus community can use to report accessibility barriers they encounter. Examples include inaccessible buildings or pathways, such as broken elevators or lack of curb cuts, technology or communication barriers like inaccessible websites or audio without captions, and transportation or parking issues, such as blocked accessible spaces or malfunctioning transit lifts. These reports are important because they help the university identify and address barriers that may impact access for individuals with disabilities. Submissions can be made anonymously, or individuals can choose to include their contact information if they would like a follow-up. All reports are reviewed and routed to the appropriate campus units for resolution. This slide displays a screenshot of our website. To report an access concern, please select the Report an Access Concern link. Faculty and staff who work with students at UNC play an important role at UNC in supporting students who receive reasonable accommodations. The UCO has developed a training that is available in Carolina Talent to provide insight into how to best create an accessible classroom and work with students. Lastly, as a reference for much of the information discussed in today's presentation about the UCO office, campus resources, and to learn more about opportunities for education and involvement, please visit the SAFE at UNC website. This website also has information about additional educational opportunities on campus related to many of the topics discussed today. Thank you for your time today and your attention. We appreciate your support in creating a safe campus community for all. Please reach out to the UCO if you have questions throughout your time at Carolina.